pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, we open the special call City Council meeting Monday, October 19th, 2015. Mrs. Vach, would you call the roll?
Mr. Roll?
Here.
Ms. Graves?
Here.
Mrs. Turner?
Here.
Mr. Kramer?
Here.
Mayor Winger?
Here. All right, first item is public comment. Who would like to come up and comment? Dr. Faraday?
Dr. Stephen Faraday, 2120 Captain's Walk, Indian River County. This whole proposal is rush, rush, rush. It's a $1 billion contract being run through in a short period of time. The last time this was done, it ended up costing all ratepayers about $150 million so far in 4.5 years. That's what the infamous 2008 City Council said that we would be paying. Could it be that the rush is also to get a deal and rates in place by November 1 in order to benefit council members? A partial side-by-side comparison of the existing contract and the new contract was made available to the public and with some dollar costs and values. A side-by-side comparison of the rates in each of the years under the new and old contract should also be provided. It still hasn't been. The value of this new contract to OUC has also been left out. For example, it's now apparent why OUC wants the ownership of the city's interest in the gas transmission lines. It's for another line of business which should be quite lucrative for OUC, by which it would bring to a proposed fortress that's all aboard Florida. That's one that's been reported in the Wall Street Journal as losing $100 million in Brazil last week. Liquid natural gas facility for shipment overseas to foreign countries. What's its true value to OUC, and has that been factored in to balance the value of the new OUC contract to both the city and to OUC? Transport rights extending beyond the term of the contract are not the usual industry practice and can be potentially worth a lot of dollars to OUC. How much is going to OUC and how much could go to the city under the existing contract? Current contract is for a longer period than the proposed new replacement. It's less market price based and has no minimum, but are these disadvantages to the city at this time? Staying with the current contract is another proposal which needs to be fully considered, costed out, and valued, and a new proposal proven to be better. OUC has not raised its rates since 2012, has closed its coal-fired Stanton plant, and may have to close its Stanton 2 coal-fired plant because of the Obama EPA clean air restrictions, all of which will increase the probability of rate increases in years 11 through 20, or 2019 to 2029, of the current city OUC contract. And that requires notification in years 7 through 10. There's also a provision in the contract which allows for the city to reject that and then to terminate the contract within a 1-year period. Also, focusing just on the rates disguises other points which would, one, impose a minimum amount of power to be purchased and possibly block a sale of the shortest portion of the system. What if the city doesn't need that much power in the future with increased solar energy use? Mr. Wright's spoken to the natural gas lines coming south from Sebastian and has indicated how city electric users who want to switch to a natural gas generator would have to install new natural gas electric generators on site at each of the on-site meters in order to generate electricity in lieu of using city electric. He noted in annotation item 3 of the listing of the new OUC contract proposal element that many customers had multiple accounts at multiple locations, that under Florida law and city tariffs, each meter location is a separate account and would be required to have a separate gas generator. That could be remedied by consolidating on-site meters. This opinion directly contradicts the opinion offered by the infamous 2008 City Council and staff that did a September 2008 consolidation of all account holders with similar names to reduce the number of electric account holders reported to PSC from 33,000 plus to 27,000 plus for just the 1 month to avoid the application of the 2008 Stan Mayfield PSC legislation, which would have applied to the city. So we get contradictory opinions. The city must get approval of a proposal from FPL for backup to the power plant being taken offline and the city's additional cost. The cost and the approvals are not yet in. Who instructed Mr. Wright to insert the initial revised Article 18 force majeure provisions into the proposal, which would have tied hands of the city over the next 8 years? The revised Article 18 is almost as bad. Who suggested that this 2015 City Council take away the decision-making of the next 8 city councils and also pay the unknown costs over the next 8 years of fighting against legislation, court cases, etc., which would possibly be a benefit to the city? Does it require a referendum? If legislation were introduced next year requiring FMPA to allow the city to sell its electric utility at FPL, the city would have to fight the proposal in the legislature and in the courts. Mr. Wright said, the basic purpose of this provision is to protect the city by giving us a glide path to avoid the potentially dramatic consequences of an adverse change in law, such as might leave us unable to continue serving customers outside the city limits. That sounds like they want to be served by the city. If the Shores is successful in its litigation against the city and unincorporated parts of the county, then those unincorporated parts of the county wanted to become towns, such as Grand Harbor, Gifford, Rockridge, etc., the city would be required to oppose that legislation and the will of those people to get the same self-governance and home rule city residents now have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Who would like to come up next? Mr. Herron?
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Vero Beach voters. Just to review.
Excuse me, sir. Can I get your name for the record?
Oh, yeah. It's Glenn Herron. I live at 1964 Gray Falcon Circle in Indian River County. I thought I'd just review a little bit about the electric utility issue since I've been involved with Dr. Faraday since 2007. 2008, the City Council signs the OUC contract promising that rates would be less than or equal to FP&L. By 2010, the OUC contract clearly failed to deliver on that promise. By 2013, the public voted to sell the FP&L. Why? Why did we vote to sell the FP&L? Because Vero's government-run electric utility is hopelessly inefficient and cannot compete. Its rates are consistently between 20 and 30% higher than FP&L. And among the many benefits of selling to FP&L, the most significant is it will allow this community to save $20 million each and every year in rates. Of course, the only obstacle to selling to FP&L is the FMPA. And thus, the only path forward to selling is to pursue action to leave the FMPA. And if you'll remember, 2 years ago, I asked this council what you were going to do about the FMPA. Well, for 2 years, you've done nothing. For 2 years, this council has done nothing to seek a rational exit price to the FMPA. For 2 years, you've done nothing to seek the return of our assets that we own at the FMPA that we've been involved with for 37 years. In fact, the only people that are attempting to rein in the FMPA is the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners and Debbie Mayfield. The path forward to selling to FP&L is to pursue legislation necessary to leave the FMPA, and for 2 years, you've done nothing about that either. Instead, it's clear to me you've done the opposite. It's clear to me you intend to sign a new OUC contract that won't deliver its FP&L rates, and that will require you to fight legislation that will allow you to sell to FP&L. Instead of joining with the county and the Shores in a common goal to sell to FP&L, you've fought them at every turn. If the county and the Shores should liberate themselves from Vero's inefficient government-run electric utility and the FMPA, Vero Beach will need to sell its assets at the FMPA. But this new OUC contract may require you to fight that too. So I hope the public, I hope the voters see this OUC contract and this council, one member accepted, for what it is. Actions speak louder than words. You can say you're for the sale, but if you do nothing to leave the FMPA, if you sign this contract, you are doing the opposite. you're thwarting the public's will to leave this inefficient government-run utility and sell to FP&L. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Who would like to come up next? Mr. Howell.
I don't have to speak hardly at all now. Harry Howe, 765 Broadway Street. Good morning, Council.
Good morning.
I have a press journal article here, which in short reads, city officials have maintained that the city system ultimately can be competitive with Florida Power and Light under new power provider, Orlando Utilities Commission. Does anybody want to guess when this was written? It wasn't 5 days ago. It's 5 years ago. And the rates are not different. They are not proportional to FP&L. So I think it's time we start doing what's right for the taxpayers. And I hope we don't sign this contract. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for your comments. Mr. Boucher, please come forward.
Mark Mucher, 617 Indian Lilac Road. I had a whole list of bullet points, but I couldn't find them, and so I'm going to spare you. I agree with the previous speakers about the fact that signing this contract will require us to fight to be able to sell FM, to be able to get out of FMPA and to sell to Florida Power and Light, to get out of the utility business, which I hope everybody agrees that that's what we need to do. But if a miracle should happen and we would somehow be allowed to do that, you're signing a piece of paper today, and I'm sure you will, that will require us to fight that. So the other speakers have all mentioned that, and I just wanted to bring it up. However, the thing I really wanted to talk about was rates. It seems like, well, a couple of things. We've got an election in a few weeks, and y'all want to say, well, we reduced your rates. Well, according to the latest papers I've seen, you're promising to reduce the rates a whopping $2.50 a month. Mayor Winger's going around saying $750,000 a month, but I've asked the city several times now and received no answer. So I did some rough calculations, and that $250 translates to $175,000 a month, which is what? Less than a quarter of the $750 he's claiming. More than half of the money he claims we're going to save per month, especially when you consider, we're losing all this money by delaying this decision, is after the contract's over, 8 years from now, and that's pure speculation. Now, that's the first year, and I guess I'd like to ask somebody if that's what the effective date of that $2.50 drop is. I've heard November 1st. I've heard backdated to October 1st. I've heard on this piece of paper I have here from Chef, it says December 1st. And I understand, I got this clarified that the rate consultant approved that. So I guess I'm asking first if our rates are actually going to go down to $119.58 on December 1st, or do we know what they're going down to, and do we know when? Can anybody answer that?
Why don't we let Mr. Wright in his presentation answer it, and if you're not happy with the answer, Mr. Mucher, you may come forward and ask it again.
Okay, thank you.
It'd be a more orderly way of doing it.
Yeah, this sheet also shows a savings in the second year of $10.80, but it really only goes down $2. And so, again, even in the second through, and then it starts coming back up, okay? Even the second through the 8th year, well, this doesn't go that far out. Our rate savings from where we are today, which is 29% higher than Florida Power and Light, are minimal. $2.50 max. And I want you to remind everybody that Florida Power and Light is going down approximately $2.50 on January 1st. So actually, our 29% is at least going to hold, if not go up. 29% higher. I'm always criticized for not saying they are some lower percent lower, but today we pay 29% more than we would pay Florida Power and Light in terms of rates. So I'm just, I hope somebody can tell me I'm wrong, but I'm just calling it what it is. It seems to be a political move to overstate rate savings and to rush into this whole thing. There's an awful lot of moving parts. I think the reason that a couple of members of the Utilities Commission voted no was because there were so many moving parts, and Chef's great, and I'm sure he does a good job for you all, but he has a little difficulty explaining something this complicated to mere humans like myself and yourselves, and even members of the Utilities and Finance Commission. So I don't know that anybody fully understands all the ramifications and unintended consequences of what you all are going to sign today. So go ahead and do it.
Thank you for your comment. Who would like to come forward next? Mrs. Moss, please.
Laura Moss, Utilities Commission Member at Large, Vero Beach. Good morning to all. On Friday, at the joint meeting of the Finance Commission and the Utilities Commission, I voted no with regard to the recommendation of that contract. Mr. Ohl was present, but for the remainder of the council, I'd like to explain my reasons why. I believe very strongly that there was a lack of due diligence with regard to this matter, and it's, of course, quite a weighty matter financially. And that occurred because we were not allowed to obtain the RFPs. We voted, and by that I mean the Joint Commission voted in favor of obtaining RFPs at the suggestion of our advisors and also our attorney. And I believe that you also voted for the RFPs. We were prevented from obtaining them after we received a threatening letter from OUC. I think that Mr. Wright did a good job responding to that, and I'll quote one of the sentences from his letter to them, where he said, "The city believes that OUC's letter gives rise to potentially serious legal consequences for OUC," and that was his letter of July 13th. This could be construed even potentially as a situation that's extortionate, in that threatening letters with intent to extort pecuniary advantage would certainly seem a reasonable thing to assume. At this point, we were forced then to negotiate with a party that was basically holding us hostage. And I think even Mr. Thomas, one of our advisors, had said that the reason, and I'm quoting now the minutes from the Utilities Commission meeting of June 9th, Mr. Thomas said one of the reasons they looked so closely at the go-to-market scenario was the due diligence to make sure the city was not shooting themselves in the foot by just negotiating with a single supplier, OUC, which is unfortunately what came to pass. And of course, any of us, you don't need to be an attorney to realize that when you're being held hostage and negotiating with the only supplier, of course you're in a less powerful position with regard to negotiation. Mr. Harrington, whose expertise we all respect, had recommended at that time, this was in June, the go-to-market scenario, which still remains the most favorable financially. In addition, the new, or the amended, I guess I should say, but it seems to be practically a new contract, we lose the gas transportation rights. In the previous or original contract, the rights at the termination of that contract were to revert to Vero Beach. In the current contract, those rights will remain with OUC. As the energy market is moving increasingly toward gas, the value of those rights could be quite substantial. And in fact, during the meeting, it was stated by a number of people, a number of experts, that they are certainly a bargaining chip in the future when you go to negotiate a new contract. So I think we have to be very hesitant to give them away. And in addition, with this new amended contract, we're committing to further legal entanglements with OUC. And finally, in closing, I would say that in the 5 months preceding this, May through September, we had 2 meetings over 5 months, and in the last 2 weeks, we had 3 meetings in 2 weeks, and it was. I think it was rather intense for a number of the commission members who all, I think, did a wonderful job. Mr. Arwars mentioned that last Friday, that everyone brings something different to it, which you certainly could see, in those meetings. But I urge you to consider the contract with all of these different things in mind. I would seriously advise against it.
Thank you for your comment. Who would like to come forward? Mr. Sykes?
Good morning, Council. Lang Sykes, 836 Riamar Drive. Thank you for hearing me. Once again, I just want to encourage everyone here, please, let's take some more time to do proper due diligence before we sign this contract. And in light of the fact that this is going to tie the hands of anyone trying to actually work for us to get out of this deal, again, would encourage you to really rethink this. I think you've all expressed the fact that you ultimately want a sale here, and that's what's best for our ratepayers. And in recent city council debates, many of you have said that ultimately a legislative solution is going to be the way out of this. So for those of us working really hard to try and find that legislative solution and galvanize support in Tallahassee, not just for us, but for the other member cities, really encourage you, please, to let us do our due diligence. Let's hire an outside consultant who is impartial and really find out what we're getting ourselves into. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your comments. Mr. Reingold, our pleasure, sir.
Good morning, Mayor. I'm not as tall. Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Dylan Reingold, County Attorney, Indian River County. I come here to you this morning. The Board of County Commissioners has expressed significant concerns with the proposal that's on the table this morning. And it's not that this contract just impacts the city of Vero Beach, but it obviously impacts the ratepayers in the unincorporated parts of this county in Indian River Shores, and that's the county and the county itself. Just 3 brief issues I'd like to touch on this morning. You've heard a lot about several of them already, so I won't go into great detail. But the first item is certainly the gas transportation contract. As I watched the meetings, it was unclear really how the valuation of those assets were taken into consideration during the course of the negotiation. And this is really significant in my mind as it becomes an issue as to what were the rates that the city was able to negotiate during those negotiations versus what is the valuation that the city placed upon those assets, and how the relationship between those two sort of play with each other. And I certainly believe that there could have been a little bit more effort in those regards. Second, the best efforts provision. I would recommend that you do include a limitation of the litigation measures which the city council would have to take, and your subsequent city councils or future city councils would have to take in the future. I would recommend that you would eliminate binding future councils to fighting the federal government anywhere and everywhere with regards to the change of law provision. I would also recommend that the changes of laws with respect to the issue of changing legislative matters in Tallahassee also be removed. I completely understand the issues, and I think this was expressed by one of the commission members, that provisions regarding current judicial actions stay in place, state actions remain. But it just seems a little bit unfair that the city of Vero Beach, as the small city that it is, would essentially be bound to be fighting these cases on its own or on its own dollar, while OUC sits in the back on the sidelines and watches the city of Vero Beach fight those battles. And finally, I wanted to touch on the take or pay provision in the contract. This essentially, I've heard is that it doesn't have a significant impact, but I still believe that there are potential losses of users, and not just from litigation, but just from other institutional users within our community. There could be changes in the technology, increases in solar use, decreases in energy use. And it's troubling that in light of the statements that were made at previous meetings by various representatives of the city of Vero Beach, that there would be flexibility in this contract to deal with those issues, and I do not believe that that flexibility has been incorporated into the contract accordingly. Thus, I just really ask that this council take seriously and look at this contract amendment with very close scrutiny. And thank you very much for your time and consideration this morning.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Who else? Mr. Gorey, come forward, sir.
Peter Gorey, I'm Chairman of the Finance Commission. I want to address some issues that were brought up by the public. One was that public municipal entities can't compete. The lowest rates in this country are by municipals, and indeed, including the state of Florida, for at least one of them. Secondly, the fact that statement was made that Vero Electric was hopelessly inefficient. I take exception to that. Our transmission and our dispatch, our linemen, our engineering, our customer services in this city, response time, I believe in operations are not hopelessly inefficient. Third thing I want to address is rates. Duke Power rate for 1,000 kilowatts for their residents is $118.50. That is without the 6% franchise fee. Gulf Power and the two eastern public utilities rates are above $133 without franchise fees. They represent 2,100,000 customers in the state of Florida, and in the aggregate have a higher rate than the city of Vero Beach. I grant you, we all know that Florida Power Light is the lowest. But to say that the rates indicate efficiency is incorrect. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Further comment?
Glenn Brovant, 702 Lantana, Vero Beach. I, too, am a member of the Finance Committee. We have spent an awful lot of time on this contract. I'm going to state bluntly, I'm for passing the contract, and for a number of reasons. One, it clearly has shortened our timeline that we're going to be in the contract with OUC. If our objective is to get out, shortening our timeline to 8 years versus 14 is certainly a plus. Secondly, using the data the city has had as supplied by our experts, I've done my own analysis on the contracts, and without a doubt, the city is saving $60 million in the first 8 years. It'll save another roughly $60 million in the years thereafter, after we're out of the contract, assuming we're out of the contract. Now, yes, some of our colleagues are right. The first year savings are not very much. $2.50 plus $1.85 is $4.25 thereabouts. But it does move up to 10, 12%, $10 or $12 a month. Now, I don't think we're tying the city's hands when I look at the contract. If we want to default the contract today and walk and pay the $50 million, we can certainly do that. It appears to me from the contract, and I know we're different, but listen to our lawyers carefully, and I think I have to listen to our city attorneys, our city lawyers. The contract clearly allows us to default 2 years from now if we want to. And when you look at it, our damage estimates would be significantly less defaulting 2 years from now than it would right now. Because the present value of our current contract runs out 14 years. The present value of a defaulted contract 2 years from now runs 4 years, and it is based on a lower cost. There is no doubt in my mind that the risk factor to the city is less by moving forward on the contract. Now, as to the issue of being locked or sort of in and fighting with the federal government, I'm pretty confident, too, that if we get to that point, we're not alone in the war with the federal government. We're one of millions or one of hundreds of cities that are going to be in the same issue. Even if the state does something that avoids a lot of things that we're dealing with today, we're, again, not alone. We got 24 sister companies working with FMPA that got the same issue. So if there's a war and we got legal bills, other cities are going to have the same legal bills, and we're going to all be in the same fight. So do I think we're tying the hands of the city council and do for? No, I don't. Do I think we're taking on a huge amount of liabilities and risk, legal risk? No, I don't. Do I really think we're benefiting our ratepayers, and that's what we're trying to do? It's clear we are. Now, it's not utopia. It's not the best. But we still have the ability to go to war next year with FMPA if we want to. It's going to take courage to do that. It's going to take resolve from the city taxpayers to do that. But if that's what we want, we can do it. I've done the analysis on going to the market. Clearly, we would have been better off. But our lawyers, who I think we have to listen to carefully, and you people, have looked at the risk factor and decided the gain versus the loss was not there. So here we are today with the contract. Now, I don't know how much more the staff can do, and I've said it in the public meetings. If we as a city no longer have respect and confidence in our experts, people we've hired and paid a lot of money to, then it behooves you to fire them both and start over. That's where we are. And today, I've listened very carefully and read all the reports, done the numbers, and I think the information we have is the best we're going to see. And I have not heard anything from our city attorney that's throwing out the contract either. So my vote is to go forward.
Thanks for your comment. We continue with public comment. Seeing no further come forward, Mr. Richard.
Mark Mucher again. I did remember one new item. I always say I do my best thinking in the shower, but I'm only in the shower 5 minutes a day. And that has to do, well, there was a lot of discussion during the Joint Commission meetings about the default and the $50 million charge and the fact that OUC was threatening us with more than $50 million. But as far as I know, the fact is we haven't clarified at all those penalties, those default penalties, which we're more than willing to pay because that's how much and more we're underwater on even this newer contract. But I'm suggesting that maybe that's one thing that you all ought to try and tweak a little bit is a clarification of the exit provisions of this contract, because that's clearly where we made our big mistake with FMPA, and I would hope you all would learn something. On the subject, I've heard rates quoted and averages and things like this. I've said it before, I'll say it again. There's no such thing as an unweighted average utility rate. What these people who talk about averages are doing are they're weighting Florida Power and Light's rate equally with Amelia Island's rate, and that's the Northeast investor-owned utility they're talking about. So it's 130, Florida Power and Light's 94, so the average is exactly in the middle, just like because they're unweighted. And I haven't seen a weighted average, and if anybody has one, I'd really like to see it. So you can't say we're below or above the average of municipals. You can't say we're below or above the average of investor-owned utilities. And by the way, even Barry Moline, the executive director for FMPA's lobbying arm, FMEA, this month says that Florida Power and Light is the cheapest. So don't listen to what these people say, because they have no idea. They don't look at the numbers. They add fees onto rates. They don't add our 10% utility tax onto rates. They add franchise fees, but not taxes. And of course, you know, the majority of you have wanted to preserve our city budget and transfers and pump everything up out of the ratepayers so that if we were to sell, we would pay both utility taxes and franchise fees. So that was just a little dig. Thank you.
Mr. Gorey again?
I was not talking about weighted averages. There's 1.2 million customers of Duke Power. There are 400,000, I'm sorry, there are 400,000 customers of Gulf as well as the facilities south that are privately owned. One question. I'm not talking about average of averages. I'm talking about what the weighted average is of the 1.2 million and the 400,000 of those utilities, which are the two East Coast, Gulf, and of course Duke Power. So the numbers I was giving was based upon weighted averages, not individuals. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, I close public comment then. That would bring Mr. Wright forward, is that correct?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, council members, citizens. Thanks again for having me back. I'm always glad to be here. I thought I might start. I'll start wherever y'all want me to start. I was going to start with a history starting in August of last year and how we got here this morning. I'm happy to respond to any of the...
No, why don't you do that? Why don't you set the ground?
And
sounds like a good idea.
Okie doke. The FPL deal hit a very thick stone wall at the end of May last year. It was memorialized in writing on June 2nd of 2014 when OUC and FMPA hit a point where they had conflicting bond covenants, and neither was willing to change its bond covenants to accommodate the others, such that we could not close the FPL transaction as it presently stands. We were ready to close it. You brought me in to try to close it. I had a good plan for the contingent liability issue, which was the big issue when I came on board on April 16th of last year, but then this bond covenant issue arose and there was nothing to be done. The transaction documents remain in place. We will close them if we can. But when that happened, we said, okie doke, we need to do what we can to address our rate situation. I've said, I don't even know, 36 times more than that over this last year and a half. Our rates are higher than we wish they were. There's not a lot we can do about that. I do believe that Mr. Gorey is correct that the city's operations, what we have direct control over ourselves, are efficient. The city's well run. We have good reliability. We have 4 power purchase agreements that comprise 70 plus or minus 66, 7, 8, 9, 70% plus or minus of our total costs. 3 of those are the MPA project contracts with Stanton, Stanton 2, and with these as members of the Stanton, Stanton 2, and St. Lucie projects. The 4th is the 2008 OUC PPA. I have looked at the FMPA contracts. A whole lot of other lawyers have looked at the FMPA contracts, and it just doesn't appear that there's any way out. There's talk of a legislative solution, but the way it looks to me, folks, is this. My understanding is that plus or minus, counting the ARP and the Tri-City project, FMPA has 5 projects, the 3 that we participate in and the other 2. FMPA has around $2.5 billion of debt. The Florida legislature, in my view, which is somewhat knowledgeable, is not going to undo $2.5 billion of the obligations of an agency of the state of Florida, the Municipal Power Agency, an interlocal agreement established pursuant to law. And I don't think the state's going to refinance $2.5 billion worth of debt on all taxpayers or however else they might do it. The FMPA is its members. Those agreements are there. It could happen. I don't know. But that brings us back to where we are today, which is what I'm focused on, is the city of Vero Beach, your citizens, and all your electric customers. And that is do what we can to lower rates. The only thing that we have any opportunity to lower rates on immediately, other than cutting staffing in the utilities department, which seems to me to be very low already, the only other thing we can do is address the OUC contract. Therefore, having cleared the decks in July of last year, after the FPL deal hit the wall in June, we cleared the decks with an agreement between us, OUC, and FPL that we could talk with each other about ways to lower rates and that nobody would fuss about those talks. Just very briefly, FPL has agreed that we can enter into the modified agreement with OUC without breaching the transaction that's on the table with FPL. We do have to agree to let FPL off the hook for some obligations relative to Big Blue, but I think it's a very reasonable request, and we discussed it, and I think we're ready to do that as soon as we get to it. Okay. Starting in August last year, then, we began talking with OUC about ways we could lower the rates. They have become agreeable over time. We had a proposal in October, a proposal in November, a proposal in February. We decided to issue an RFP in the spring. That elicited a different response than the one that I was expecting. I was wrong in my estimation of that. We then went back to them in July, got additional concessions worth $6+ million, and got to the point where we are today. The fundamentals of the deal are we get lower rates in the short term, the next 8 years, than under the existing PPA, and not a little bit lower, significantly lower than under the existing PPA, and we get out of the contract 6 years earlier than we would otherwise. Both of those have real value to us. Plus or minus, our estimate of the net present value of the savings in the short term or the medium term, the 8 years of the new PPA, is about $52 million. The present value of the savings in the last 6 years of being able to be in the market as opposed to being under the existing PPA is worth about $67 million. The nominal translation of that's $171 million. Naturally enough, OUC, as the counterparty, wanted some value for itself. What value do they want? They want the minimum demand floor, which gives them some protection that they don't presently have. They want the FGT contracts. We and we can talk about this in as much or as little detail as you all want to, but I did want to talk further about the recent history of the negotiations and what information has been made available to the public. We had a red line in early August that was distributed widely in response to public records type requests. They weren't formal public records requests and citing 119, but that's what they were, and we gave it out. We distributed the first one on August 21st. We distributed a second red line on September 3rd, and we distributed a third red line on September 21st, 4 weeks ago today, that was almost identical to the version that the Finance Commission and Utilities Commission voted out with favorable recommendations this past Friday. There were 3 changes from the September 21st red line to the one that they voted out on Friday. At the request of the commissions, I went to OUC and asked, and they agreed to delete Article 12, which related to the site lease option. We asked, commissions asked me, I asked OUC, we agreed, and they agreed that we would clarify the pro rata allocation of recovery under hypothetical stranded cost litigation pursuant to Section 15.11.2. And there was some clarification as to the capacity deficiency pricing in Exhibit C, Section 3.2b, that OUC also agreed to clarify to make it clear that we would only be charged OUC's actual costs if they were purchasing. That is, if there were one rate for one block and one rate for another block, they wouldn't charge us the higher rate for everything. They would charge us the high rate for the high price block and the lower rate, whatever that might be, for the lower price block, or they would charge us the higher demand charges and their peaking energy charges under the existing PPA, which however it works out. They agreed to make those changes. There were some additional requests made after that by the commissions that we asked OUC for some further changes. I did make those requests. OUC declined. Those requests were that they agree to share 50-50 on the litigation cost in the event that we found ourselves in the position, due to an adverse change in law, of having to seek stranded cost recovery. We asked that they agree to reduce the scope of the types of events that would give rise to the city's right to invoke 15.11.2, which again protects the city in the event that there is a significant adverse change in law that would prevent us from performing or make it unduly burdensome for us to perform economically. I can talk more about that in a minute. And we asked that they reconsider the term in the PPA by which they would take permanent release of our FGT contracts at the termination of the contract. They declined on all of those, except they were agreeable to deleting the reference to federal action from 15.11.2, as I explained in a memo that I wrote last Wednesday and was distributed to everybody, I do believe. I don't think that's a good idea, and I would recommend against it, as I would recommend against deleting the reference to state legislation that might make it difficult for us to perform. And that gets us to where we are. Staff continue to recommend approval of the new PPA. You have a clean version of the red line version, which you previously received last week. I did a red line with the 3 changes that OUC agreed to that was distributed last week after another commission's meeting. The clean version you got today is the clean version of what the commissions voted to recommend on Friday. We have, in doing a final review, and partly due to some good comments from Commissioner Moss at Friday's joint session of the commissions, we would propose 4 additional changes. I'll tell you, 3 of them are very minor. Let's see if I can pull this off. Excuse me. I'll start by saying disregard that header. Oh, that's not the right one, sorry. No.
Are you saying the header is?
The header is extraneous. The OUC originally created the document. I couldn't get rid of it.
I would recommend putting a note on there because if it becomes a matter of record, the date will be skewed.
Okay. Will do. Okay, I just want to run through these changes. They're minimal. In the first line of the title of the agreement on the cover page where it says first amended and restated agreement for purchase and sale, we recommend inserting the word "the" for the purchase and sale, and that matches up to, come on now. Sorry, hang on. That matches up to the title on page 1 of the agreement. You'll see at the top there, it's the purchase and sale. So that's that match. Then there's on page 18 in Article 13, which I'll get to in a second here, I believe. If you see, this is the version that the commission's voted out. It says during the term this first amended agreement, we would insert the word "of" to say during the term of this first amended agreement. It was like that in the original agreement, which is why it's like that here. But we would insert the word "of." I'm going to jump to the end. There was just a flat-out typo in the definition of wholesale electric service down the very last page, or last page of the definitions. In the next to the last line, it says, as provided for herein, comma, and the supply or arrangement for, that should be the supply of or arrangement for. We would propose to change that. And finally, I'm going to go back to Article 5 of the PPA itself, Section 5C. Section 5C had references to termination pursuant to Section 12.2, which is part of the now deleted Article 12, which was the site lease option. And so Commissioner Moss pointed this out, and I agreed with her observation that it would be better practice to clean that up. Accordingly, I have changed what is now, you'll see up there, 5C, that's 5C as it stands, as approved by the commissions on Friday. It continues to include the references to subsection 12.2, which is part of the site lease option, which is no longer operative. And we propose to change that, and I'll show you how. It's taken out the references to Section 12, and it now relates only to our right to terminate pursuant to Exhibit C, Appendix B, Section 1A, which is our right to terminate in the event that OUC invokes a right to increase rates pursuant to that subsection. So with those changes, we would recommend that you authorize the mayor to execute the agreement. And I will tell you this is subject to OUC's approval, but I don't foresee a problem. I came back home on Friday night. We did our final review over the weekend. I sent these to my counterpart, Mr. Browder, yesterday. He was at a planning council meeting or something like that and hasn't gotten back to me yet. I don't think there's going to be a problem with these. They all make perfect sense. The 3 words are completely appropriate, and so is the change suggested by Commissioner Moss to Section 5C. So that's our recommendation. Now, I generated a lot of stuff last week that include a summary of the background for the backup for the $750,000 a month estimate, where that came from, and how it really translates in real terms out there. We can talk about that. I can talk more about 15.11.2, the change in law provision, which we talked about a lot, but we can talk about that some more. And I did, later than I wanted to, but I did prepare the side-by-side comparison of the values to OUC and the city as requested by Councilmember Turner. I need to grab my copy of that.
Which you received October the 15th, just for the record.
Well, one comment while you're preparing that, I think all 5 of us, one way or another, sat through the 10 or more hours of the Joint Commission's hearing, and I commend them on the detail, and I think the transparency has been excellent. So, to some degree, I think we are quite familiar with all of these points. If there's somebody that's not, then it's fair to ask questions, but I'm familiar with them all. So,
and if I could add to that, I really appreciate the process, and I really appreciate what I think would be extraordinary above and beyond the call effort of the commissioners. I was very impressed. I got calls from 2 or 3 of them by myself. They called my cell phone and had good conversations with them. Good, very thoughtful conversations. Their questions were insightful. Their suggestions were very good, and I really appreciated that all around. Thank you.
I have two things I wanted to ask about. Implicit in all this is the plant no longer operating. That's number one. And also implicit in this is the decision that was made quite some time ago to levelize rates, which accounts for the smaller decrease in the first year and the bigger decreases in later years. You might comment on those, since that was the first one. It wasn't brought up, but I think we do need to bring it up. In other words, that the plant will close. And the second one, so that people understand that what we're attempting to do is levelize rates. Those I think we could talk about a bit.
Sure. Well, depending on how you look at it, I look at it this way. If you look at just the base capacity purchase from OUC, this is prefatory to getting to your question about the plant, Mayor. If you just look at the base product purchase, we save a lot of money. They're knocking significant dollars off the capacity charges. The energy charges will remain the same as they would be otherwise. We're saving a lot of money on the capacity charges. We're then buying peaking capacity from OUC and it will enable us to shut down Big Blue. That will save us a significant amount of money. In fact, it will save us a bit more money than it will cost us, like $6 million nominal over the 8 years. We'll save by shutting Big Blue down to its projected lower level of cost. It doesn't go to zero. That's part of the difference between the early August estimate that we had and the revised estimate, which the early August estimate was $126 million. That revised down to $119.7 million when, after the final budget was adopted by Council, Mr. Fletcher and Ms. Lawson put pencil to paper and came up with more refined numbers for the Big Blue costs. They were higher than we expected them to be. We rolled them back in. That took the numbers down to 119. It would, instead of being what we thought was going to be $600,000 in fiscal 16, it's $2.9 million, and the ongoing cost, instead of being $200,000, it's $832,000. That includes the pension liability and includes 4 staff for continuing care of the plant, whatever it is. But that's that. So we do get to close the plant. The costs don't go to zero. They go to $832,000 a year, as best estimated by your experts on that subject, Mr. Fletcher and Ms. Lawson. The OUC offered us I'm now going to address the rate trajectory. OUC offered us a stream of capacity payments that started at $8,331 a megawatt month and increased to $11,038 per megawatt month over the term. They also agreed that were we to use their discount rate, and we did, that we could tilt the demand charges so as to achieve a more levelized structure. Let me see if I can get to that. Now, this is the one I wanted. It's not. Fortunately, you all have copies, so I think you can read it, and there are copies available. But what this shows is that we will be able to, as compared to the existing PPA, our costs will be $4.35 less per 1,000 kilowatt hours going forward. $1.85 of that is already implemented through the essentially the crediting of surplus collections over the last year. But we then predict to be able to go to, and I vetted this with the consultants, this is subject to final sign-off by Ms. Lawson, but having vetted it with the consultants, I feel pretty good about it. We should be able to take our average residential bill down to $119.58, effective for usage on and after December 1. And then a further reduction of a couple more dollars in 17, and then it does creep back up. But the point is the long-run trajectory, because of the way we tilted, as I use the term, that's a non-technical term of art that's used by rate experts. We tilted the demand charge trajectory over time. It would keep the projected average residential bill per megawatt hour between $117 and $122 over the 8 years, leaving you at 2023, when the city debt rolls off, we get a little extra bump downward there. It leaves you with a rate that's about 0.5% higher in 2023 than it is in 2016. Now, as I've said probably too many times, or more than you guys want to hear, that depends on things holding still. That depends on the assumptions we have made. And the critical ones are that the sales forecast holds up, and we did make a conservative assumption on sales as compared to FPL, Duke, and OUC, 0.5% as opposed to 1+%, and that the price of natural gas stays where it is. If the price of gas goes up, our rates will be higher. Our gas price forecast is below, the number for 16 is below, in our forecast, is above current market prices. So standing here today, it looks like a good assumption. Is there going to be a hiccup in the price of gas sometime in the next 8 years? I would bet probably so. I don't know where it's going to wind up. But those are the assumptions we made.
But anyway,
the bottom line is you've got a relatively flat rate trajectory for 8 years, assuming the assumptions that we have made.
But anybody buying gas would have the same issue. But for the public to understand, the attempt is to levelize the rates. In other words, rather than taking it down as much as we could the first year, what we're doing is taking it down less than the first year so we can avoid escalation in later the remaining 7 years.
That's exactly right.
And we could have taken advantage of it and politicized it and gotten a bigger increase now if we wanted to.
You could have done that, yes, sir.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, the demand charge that we negotiated in the tilt is $2,600 a megawatt month higher under what we negotiated than under the rate originally proposed by OUC. $10,978 per megawatt month versus $83.31 per megawatt month. And we did that for exactly the reason the mayor articulated, and that is to have higher rates in the early years so we can have lower rates in the out years. That was the policy direction we sensed, staff sensed, that you wanted to go in.
And that accounts for the disparity between the $700,000 is, explain that compared to what it is the first year.
Well, it's a combination of factors, and includes the Big Blue cost being higher than what we thought they would be. But the $750,000 number came out of our early August estimates, which were based on what we shook hands with OUC on July the 30th, which turned out to be really close until the Big Blue numbers changed at the end of September after the budget was finalized. But we projected at that time net present value savings over the 14 years, which is, in my opinion, is the right analysis period, because we're looking at a 14-year term on the existing PPA, savings of $126 million net present value versus the existing PPA. The arithmetic is simple. You divide $126 million by 14, you get $9 million. You divide a year, you divide $9 million a year by 12 months per year, you get $750,000 a month. If you were to take the nominal numbers, the average would be significantly higher. It would be more like $1 million a month over the whole period. As I said, there was a tilt, and that changed the near-term effects, and the Big Blue costs were higher than what we thought the Big Blue costs were higher than what we thought they would be, such that that estimated cost for fiscal 16 is about the estimated all-in cost reduction for fiscal 16 is about $3.8 million, or about $317,000 a month. That would jump to $650,000 per month in 17 and $720,000 per month in 18. In 24, the nominal savings is about $1.3 million per month. 24 is relevant because that's the first year that we're, by assumption, if you execute this contract, you will be in the market starting January 1st of 2024, because this contract will be over.
I think we should let counsel I've asked my questions to Mr. Kramer, Mrs. Turner, Mr. Old. Mr. Kramer, we'll let you go first if you like.
Well, I've sat through those meetings. Actually, I sat out in the hall when I watched them, a little more comfortable out there. I think we've just beat this thing to death. But I do like the idea of getting out of this contract a lot earlier. I was pretty much gung-ho to do the RFP, to go out to market. That seems to me the most intelligent way of doing this. Unfortunately, that didn't turn out as well. But I like the idea of getting out of this contract sooner. I like the lower prices, and I don't have many questions that haven't already been asked throughout the joint meetings.
Ms. Turner?
I certainly did follow the Finance and Utility Commission meetings as well. I was glad to get this request that I had about the balance of the contract, the benefits that Orlando Utility gets versus what Vero Beach gets. I would have had hoped for a bit more of a financial and a summary of analysis on it of costs, but at least it was delivered on the 15th of October. At this point, I have no further questions.
Ms. Graves.
Does this contract prohibit a sale to FPL if a path forward can be found?
No.
Okay, that's all I have.
Mr. Old.
I just, again, I liked the process. I thought it was very thorough, very well done, a large participation over a long period of time, and I thought it was really well done. I have no other comments.
Mr. O'Connor.
Well, as I have said at several of these meetings, and fortunately for me, I've been able to sit through them with Chef at my side. There were two goals that, in my opinion, we were trying to achieve as we entered into this over a year ago. One is the shorter term. We heard from many, many people that the term of the contract that was signed in 2008 was too long, and in the people's opinion today that they would never sign a contract with that length of term for this type of purchase. So we got a shorter term. The second thing is lowering rates, and I think this contract specifically addresses that, and we are under a power purchase contract with lower rates. So in essence, my two goals were really achieved. The discussion about we have to go fight the federal government if there's a constitutional amendment to the U.S. government or something addressing Vero Beach Electric, we always have the other option, which is we could default on this contract. We have shorter term. It has been pointed out our exposures are, even though the $50 million's in there, it's up to $50 million. That is not a payment of $50 million. Our presumption was with the term of the contract as it exists today, going to 2029, OUC would be able to show us a $50 million loss. They obviously would be obligated to do that, but that was an assumption, especially on my part. I think this shorter term and the new amended contract provides and limits that exposure and liability. And again, as Chef says, from the staff's standpoint, we would recommend this amendment.
Mr. Comment.
Nothing I can really add.
You don't have to comment if you don't want to. But
no, I think this has been thoroughly discussed.
Okay. I think we should open a public comment. Then I see Mr. Moocher behind.
I have a quick question, but also trying to follow up on my rate question. I know you referred me to Mr. Wright, but Mr. O'Connor's the one that sets the rates. You all can disagree if you want, but the rates are set by city staff. So I want to know if in fact we're going down exactly $2.50 and when.
It is anticipated the bills that would be rendered to the customers in December would reflect that decrease, and it is estimated at this time at the $2.50. I have no reason to doubt that it would be anything other than that.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is, it was probably 2 years ago when it came to light that the Lake Worth contract that Mr. Wright negotiated had rates in it where our rates are a third more than what they're paying. And Mr. O'Connor explained to me that our rates contained, I believe, more things than theirs did, and I believe they were primarily management services. Well, two things. The management services, upon the closing of Big Blue, are basically going away, at least the majority of OUC's responsibility. And the other thing is that Mr. Wright, when he negotiated these rates, didn't know that we didn't pay out-of-pocket management fees. So having said all that, my question is, do we have any clue how much of the lower rates we're getting have to do with the fact that they're not providing management fees anymore?
The management fees were really in the operation of our power plant, in the fact that they would dispatch our plant and those type. We do not have a real handle on those fees, but the fact of the matter is we're simplifying the contract under this amendment that we are doing. Again, Lake Worth has a much simpler purchase, and it's a shorter term contract. So the management fee issue is really an insignificant number from the operation, but it was required in the fact that they do dispatch our plant. And so that was the process, and that was part of our all-in cost. As you'll notice on our bills, we do not have a specific line item that I'm aware of for management fees.
Yeah, only NERC compliance, I believe, and there still is a management fee paragraph in this new contract that y'all are going to sign today.
No question. If we needed them to help us on our NERC providing the information, we would still ask OUC. As a matter of fact, we've asked FP&L in the past to help us on our NERC compliance.
No, I understand they're continuing to supply NERC compliance. This was facilities planning and reporting to the state and all those kind of other fees, whatever they are. I don't profess to fully understand them, but I just think that part of our savings had to do with those kind of things. And I don't know whether it's on your side-by-side comparison, but that's one of the benefits to them is that those management fee and tasks and responsibilities are removed from their side of the equation. And I'm thinking that part of our rate savings are to offset that. But I guess the answer is we can't quantify that at this time.
We don't really have a handle on that number, but there's no question, again, coming back and negotiating the contract, there's benefits theoretically to both parties. Otherwise, there is no reason to have a contract. And in our particular case, the savings of a shorter term and the lower cost for our purchase power, no matter what that equation is on the other side, were the goals that we were trying to achieve. And in my opinion, that's what we have achieved under these terms and conditions. And so therefore, whether they saved on management fees, filling out of our NERC compliance requirements, which, by the way, by getting out of the power generation business, our NERC requirements are going to go down, and hopefully we will take other steps to even minimize it even greater. But there's no question that they had to save something on the other side of the equation. We got to remember we are under contract with OUC, so there has to be a motivation for them to come to the table, even to begin with. I mean, and I think that's part of the process.
Yeah, I understand that. I haven't seen it, but is there a financial analysis on closing Big Blue, the costs and the savings and the timetable of the whole thing?
Mr.
Because
Mutcher,
I realize it won't go to zero.
Mr. Mutcher, I think we have 2 or 3 more issues other than the amended 2008 OUC contract, and I was going to bring precisely that one up because I think you're correct. I think we need to put that on the table and give some direction to the city manager of what we think or expect him to do and what the steps are.
All right. Well, and then finally, I don't want to take this as a compliment, but on one hand, it came out on Friday that it became apparent that the position that we're in is that we have to sign this, because if we don't, on December 1st, when we shut down the plant, our rates will go through the roof. And if we don't sign this, and I don't know if we've quantified that at all, but getting by the door on that one.
Again, what I was thinking, and Mr. Wright and Mr. O'Connor are aware of it, is that we'd act on this, then we'd come back and deal with the kind of issues you're talking about. I mean, I think the city manager has to be given specific policy direction, which I plan to ask the council for.
Okay,
and have your comment on, because you're exactly correct.
Is it okay if I just answer Mr. Mutcher's direct question?
Okay.
We did not specifically negotiate on the management services management fee issue. There is no separate management fee under the contract. Under the contract, they provide certain management services for us. It's kind of rolled in. We did not attempt to do a quid pro quo analysis of the dollars on that. It's a package deal that includes bulk power supply, generation planning, peaking supply, covers capacity deficiency. We got a concession on the amount of demand we have to pay for the base product, which enables us to have lower costs there. It was a package deal.
All right. Further public comment.
We did reprice the St. Lucie 2 value between October and November. But
Mrs. Moss, come forward, please.
Laura Moss, Vero Beach, Utilities Commission member at large. I just had a single question. When we received the threatening letter from OUC, I thought that Mr. Wright wrote a very strongly worded response to it. And I looked through the minutes and I didn't see what actually happened. Why did we not stand our ground in that instance? And who made that determination?
I will take that responsibility in the fact that when we had the discussion and the letter was received from OUC, we were notified by at least one vendor they were no longer interested in participating. In my opinion, it made the marketplace not what we had envisioned, in the fact that it was not going to be a fair and open marketplace. There was still power out there to receive, but we really felt like that anybody that bid, because if we remember the letter from OUC said not only the city of Vero Beach, but any supplier would be held responsible in their opinion. And so the marketplace was askew, and it was my opinion that we needed to pull that. Obviously, the city council at the next meeting could have made any decision they wanted to, but when you have the marketplace that's interfered with, you're not really getting true market value at that point. If we wanted to go through, and as you know, that Chef did follow up with his letter. But Chef, you had some comments, or?
Well, it would seem that Mr. Wright would have been able to overcome that. I think the law was on our side or his side, according to that letter. I understand what you're saying, that it changed the marketplace, but I certainly would have hoped that Mr. Wright would have had the opportunity to combat that heavy-handedness that was going on at that time. Anyway, thank you.
And we did do that, obviously, with the response that was sent out. But again, if you were a power supplier, let's say that you were, any power supplier, would you want to get entangled in that web that could even delay, even if you responded?
No, I agree with you in that regard. But what I'm saying is I would have hoped that Mr. Wright would have been able to, remove that situation. Thank you.
And the city has no provisions by state law that we could hold people harmless. So we couldn't say, don't worry about it, come on in, because we can't accept other people's liabilities.
Well, it's unfortunate, but this entire matter is the result of being held hostage. Not the best situation.
Well, Mrs. Moss, when you talk about that, just think we all want out of FMPA. So, be it as it may be. Mr. Wright, do you have any further comment? All right, I'll entertain a motion then.
A motion to approve Finance and Utility Commission's recommendations.
I'll second.
With the changes, if
with the changes,
assuming,
correct.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Ms. Turner.
Yes, I'd just like to comment before the vote. First, once again, to thank. A lot of gratitude goes to our Finance and Utility Commission members for the hours and the effort they put in trying to evaluate this. Unfortunately, a lot of the financial data was not forthcoming and required numerous public records requests to get some of that information. In dealing with OUC, once again, you have to look at our history with Orlando Utilities Commission. They are a member of FMPA. When we executed the contract in 2008, we had redacted contract. Things were considered trade secret. We had this whole lack of transparency. Once again, trying to delve into the financial details for this contract, we're told it's confidential proprietary data. Without signing a release, we could not get access to those. The council said that we didn't go to market because we were afraid of litigation. Yet the contract that's before us today has the most onerous potential for involving us in litigation that I have ever seen in a contract. We are looking at approximately $1 billion contract. Mr. Wright waves, they made a $6 million concession. That's less than 1%. I look at the balance of the terms in this contract, and I think they've done an excellent job of protecting Orlando Utility Commission. But I don't see the protection for the city of Vero Beach ratepayers. Therefore, I will be voting no to this contract.
All right. I think we should open up for public comment before I call.
We have a motion on the floor. Public comment's not appropriate.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I'll call the question then.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
No.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
Passes 4-1.
All right. I think we have some other things we should address. One, the one Mr. Mucha brought up, which I think is correct. I think the city council, and I would make a motion that the city manager be directed to terminate operations permanently of Big Blue as soon as that's reasonably practical. That would be my motion.
Well, I'll second that. Just for them, I'd like to see the financials of it with the benefits. I'm sure there's a benefit to it. I'd just like to see the numbers to it.
Yes, and I believe that Chef has provided some of those numbers on the closing of Big Blue, but the fact is that we are sort of still relying on a third party. FP&L did give us the preliminary draft report that appears that we can close on December the 1st. If that date holds true in this transmission, and it's got to be reviewed only by one other group, as I understand it, and that's the Florida Reliability Coordinating Council. And FP&L sets a pretty big seat on that. Assuming that goes through, then our intent would be on December the 1st, there'd be no more generation of electricity from the power plant. Then we have to go through the process of decommissioning, i.e. we have fuel oil in the back.
Let's deal with that one second. That's my second.
I think personnel issues, too. When you're looking at the feasibility, the cost issues, I think we still haven't identified what, employee benefits, other things that will have to be paid out. And I think the council needs to see a full analysis of the
We can provide that analysis.
Before making a decision to close.
Well, I'm not sure that the financial decision to close is going to be predicated on this contract that we just signed, and there's no way, and the cost of operation of that plant, and your payouts for vacation and pension plan versus deferring and keeping the plant open means you're going to be paying salaries and increasing that exposure as you go forward. So it's not something. But we'll do the analysis.
The analysis is appropriate, but I have a motion in a second. We should open it to public comment. But all I am trying to do with the motion is authorize the city manager to do what's necessary. The other day in one of the commissions, he was asked, we talk about closing the plant. Where was he authorized to do it? All I'm trying to do is authorize him to do it in his best opinion when that's applicable, and certainly with the financial analysis. So if there's comment. And the next thing I will want to talk about is the one Mrs. Turner brought up, which is dealing with some of the costs, the timing, what is actually done. That's, to me, a separate issue other than authorizing a close. Go ahead, Mr. Mosher. It's kind of your issue.
Mayor, you'd have a motion on the floor, and really the rules say there's no participation from the audience once you've got a motion. So I don't. If the council wants to violate its own rule, that's up to you.
Mr. Musha, would you be happy to comment on the second one that I'm going to bring forward?
Well, I just wanted to remind you that you're voting on something without the financial analysis that at least two of you have asked for.
Okay. I'll call the motion then.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Not without financial analysis.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Winger?
Yes.
Passes 4-1.
I think the next thing that we need to bring forward is what happens then. In other words, we have a plant that at some point in time has been permanently closed, and I think what has to happen is the information needs to be developed as to what that means. In other words, what can be taken out of the plant and salvaged? Is the building going to still be there? What is the cost of all that? What's the cost of the employees? And I think that once the city manager develops that sort of information, it absolutely must go to the two involved commissions before it comes back to city council. In other words, there's lots of decisions there. Are we going to free up only the back 12 acres? What are the consequences? It's kind of a complicated subject. And I think we need to I think we need to deal with it going forward and look at both the finance and the practicality of it.
Indeed, I think that maybe there's some way of figuring out what it would take to take the whole plant down. I understand that St. Lucie had, I think I'm not sure, but there was a plant south that had Fort Pierce that had a lot bigger problem. I've heard both things, that we're going to have the same problems they had, and I've heard no, we're not going to have the same problems because there was not a prior industry business on top of that same plant. So maybe we can do directional soil samples or coring or something to try to figure out if there's anything underneath there that we'd have a problem with. But I think we really have to make an effort to figure out, if we could figure out what the mitigation costs were to any kind of problems there.
We can proceed with the plan.
Go ahead,
decommission.
I just want to point out for the public that even power plant building itself, the turbines are not operable. We also have a substation there. We're just partially in the building. That substation will have to remain there, or other provisions made for it. But it's not as if closing that power plant would give us that opportunity to completely clear the riverfront area.
Well, it may at some cost.
Sure. I mean, that's certainly an issue.
And what I'm thinking about is what we should do is have the city manager and his staff come forward with maybe more than one plant.
Yes.
And then take those to the Utility Commission and to the Finance Commission for vetting and their decision about what the best course of action is. I think rather obviously we can take the generators out and sell them. There's oil in one of the two tanks. The tanks actually can be taken out of there. There's a great deal of material there that can be sold for money. Although we may lose money on it versus book value, we still will be getting a cash flow. So the first step is, what do you do with what is easily removable? The water treatment is an example, air compressors and so on. The second step is harder, as you point out, because the switching gears inside the building, the transformers in front of the building, we had an estimate, I think it was $4 million to take it down. But I think what we should do is ask the city manager over the next, I envision it'll be a project that could take, 90 days, 120 days to figure out what to do, realistically. Mm-hmm. And then only with vetting of the various commissions.
Yeah. And I think actually there's one other issue, and that is our utility business, our electricity business. Should we be running that? Should the city council be running that? Or should we be trying to get a third party to be running it that has expertise in running it? I think we've proven over and over again that this $100 million business, which is 5 times the size of the city, is maybe something the city council shouldn't be running. And maybe we should be getting an outside company. Is it Florida Power and Light? Is it Duke Energy? Is it some consulting firm? Is it whatever? Somebody who has an expertise in this to be doing it, that our ratepayers will have confidence in. They don't have confidence in us, and they don't have confidence in past councils. And why not get an expert to run something like this rather than have ourselves do it? I think we ought to look at that. Anyway.
That is actually a good idea. Winter Park is a really good example of that.
Yes, indeed.
They only have 4 employees in their electrical utility, and it's contracted out to ENCO.
Yeah. And maybe, I think that what we do well is we service and distribute very well here. And maybe that sticks and it's managed and somebody else is trying to figure out how we buy power and who it comes from and that sort of thing. But it's something that can be designed to fit us. And I just think that having somebody else do it would make everybody feel a lot better. Anyway,
Mr. Mucher, you opened this subject up, so keep going.
A couple things, Mark Mucher. I like Mr. Old's idea conceptually. However, the ratepayers and to a lesser extent the city and the taxpayers are still responsible for the bills, the costs, the risks, the disasters, whatever at the end of the day. Also, those kind of services don't come free. I don't know that you would show a savings, or you'd almost have to show a savings in order to contract for those kind of services. On the other hand, I wanted to ask about Big Blue potentially coming down or selling pieces, parts, scrap, inventory, whatever, out of there. Last I knew, we had a $30 or $40 million bond on the electric utility. Is that on the plant, or is that on T&D, or on the whole bundle, or don't we have to kind of pay that off before we sell it off?
No, sir. I think that's on general revenue of the utility ratepayers. The $50 million.
Okay, so
it's not tied to any one item.
Okay, well,
I guess that's good then.
Yeah, one other thing, I think of a management contract more as an insurance policy, so that the council or the city doesn't make mistakes that are very costly going forward. So I'm thinking that, okay, maybe we made a mistake with this 08 contract. Maybe we made a mistake with jumping into FMPA that cost us a lot of money over a long period of time. And if we had a management contract that cost us X amount per year, it would have saved a heck of a lot more than the cost of the contract. And that's kind of the way I'm looking at it, not as an added bunch of expenses that would push the rates back up again. So.
Let's deal with them stepwise. I mean, I don't know that we need a vote, but is there general consensus from the council that the city manager should, in due time, come forward with a plan of what to do with the assets there?
Certainly.
Is that agreeable with everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we have agreement on that. On Mr. Oll's suggestion, it's attractive to me too. I don't know how you'd go at it.
Well, you do an RFP, I would assume. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd do an RFP, and you'd get quite a few people.
Yeah.
We can do the research on that and try to figure out. In Winter Park now, Winter Park is a member of FMPA, and I know how everybody gets excited.
No.
So just to put it in perspective, Mr. Mucher does bring up a very good point. Those services don't come free.
No.
And so even though that in Winter Park they have 4 employees assigned to the electric department, they pay considerably more bills on an annual basis than for 4 employees. But we can look into that and use Winter Park, since it's sort of the homegrown, and it's close to us, and see what kind of RFP that they actually put out, and see if we can follow up on some of that information.
He could come down and talk to us about what he did and what's the guy, Jerry Warren, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's retired, isn't he?
Yeah, he retired.
He just retired from
Yeah.
Winter Park.
Does that mean he's available?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So there's general consensus should be followed through. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I don't think we're ready to tackle today, but it's on tomorrow's agenda, is, and Mr. Kramer has brought it up before, I think we need a long-term plan for the waterfront. And I think that it would be a mistake to move ahead with the annex property across the street until we had such said plan. I think you've got to think about, as it's been stated many times, this is a stretch of waterfront that doesn't exist for the public any place that we can think of, north or south, for quite a long time. And I don't think we're ready to cross over it yet, but Mr. Kramer, this was your subject to start with, visioning what we do.
Well, definitely. I think, we've got a lot to digest here probably in the next month or two. But, this was something I wanted to bring back around and see if, the council wanted to conceptualize what we wanted there and kind of get moving on that. But I'd like to see us digest this contract first.
Yeah, and I don't think it's council, but I see the thing. We need to know what the public wants, and the same sort of process as the Art Village and so on. I had one last thing as I talk to people around town, and I know the answer to this, but I'm doing it for the public. One of the concerns that I get is the billing system. We can't electronically pay. There's lots of things we can't do, and I know we're well on our way to restructuring Corinta, but when do you expect we're going to have something in place? Because the public is concerned of what the bill says. They don't understand it, not being able to pay electronically, you name it.
Well, hopefully in the first quarter of next year, we will have a change in the bill itself where we take the fuel adjustment off. The actual billing or paying online is going to take some more time than that. We have to interface with Wells Fargo and our computer. We have just changed some software, made some software modifications. So hopefully we're moving in that direction. I do not have a date for that.
Is that logistical issues or money issues, or is that why
logistical?
Is it?
It's logistical in the fact that it deals with our software that we had that was considerably out of date. We had not reinvested in that software for several years.
Yep.
We just went through the change of that about 2 weeks ago, where we closed the customer service for a day and went through the transition over the weekend. But there are several items that need to be upgraded in that transition.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, on November 2nd or whenever, could you come back give us some more idea of when we're going to be, where we're going to be?
If we threw some more money at it, would we speed it up a little?
No, because the problem we have, we got to be right the first time.
Okay.
This cannot be something that's error driven, and so therefore we have to run. For example, on the Kayanta change of our software package, that took us several weeks of redoing the billing, duplicate bills that did not go out. They stayed with us, but we were able to interface that transition of the software packages. So when we sent that first bill out, it was correct. And so it just takes time to do that.
Could you, when would you come back with some sort of an estimate when all this is going to happen?
Maybe not tomorrow, but the next council meeting.
November 2nd.
November 2nd.
3rd. I'm sorry.
3rd.
Okay. Mr.
Mark Mucher again. On that subject, I agree with Mayor Winger. The public is very interested in things as little importance as the description of the first two lines on the electric bill. However, Mr. O'Connor just used the A word, fuel adjustment. There is no fuel adjustment, hasn't been for many, many years. And I specifically remember John Lee telling a very good friend of mine many years ago that we can put whatever you want on those two lines. We can call it whatever you want. Mr. Winger, I think you gave a wrong answer at one of the forums in that it was going to cost $500,000 to change those words. I don't
remember that, but if I
did,
I
it was one of you. I'm sorry, I might be wrong. But it obviously they could have done it a long time ago. All it takes is a little resolve and direction to clarify that problem. Although we do have the new software now, and hopefully it will become a little bit more clear. I had suggested many times, have an electrical portion of the bill, a garbage portion of the bill, and a water and sewer portion of the bill, but it's still all lumped together, all the taxes are together. So when people say they get their electric bill, they've got all those 3 or 4 items lumped together, so they don't know what they're paying for electric, and they can't compare it with their neighbors in the county. The people in the county are still paying. We pay twice as much for electricity as the city in as the residents of Vero Beach. Well, obviously that's not true, but they can't put the bill side by side and make any kind of comparisons at all because of the taxes and the fees and the things I mentioned before. So I hope you all will give some direction to the staff to try and start solving that problem.
I think you're exactly correct. I've had numerous people tell me, why can't I see what my electric total is? I mean, why can't they?
They can. It's on the bill.
No, but a subtotal, in other words, what they do is they just go to the bottom line. And
one of the problems, we do conjunctively bill. If we want to send 3 bills out or 4 bills, depending on what we want to do, but the fact is it appears that the majority of customers prefer to have that one bill as opposed to multiple bills coming out.
I don't know. I've had 40 to 50 people that don't understand their bill and don't like the way it's laid out and would like to know what the election.
But some of that software determined. I mean, what comes into the system is printed out in a certain way, and I think changing it is an issue of the software. And so with this new software changes, maybe we'll be able to do that.
That is correct. We will be able to do that.
Yeah.
Well, having raised a number of issues, who else would like to raise an issue? Mr. Mutcher, thank you. I agree with your last comment totally. Motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.